Hello, I want to talk about why I think Jimmy Page is the greatest guitarist ever, or at least especially in the rock world. So many people typically cite Jimi Hendrix, Eric Clapton, and those people had strong influences on guitar players. But Jimmy Page had the biggest influence on me, and having studied all three of them, I feel like Jimmy Page is the best of all of them. So here's why. So first of all, a lot of people think Jimmy Page is like the founder of heavy metal, and he may be. A lot of Led Zeppelin music was heavy metal sounding, but Jimmy Page was extremely diverse. One of the things I thought was pretty cool is he was a studio musician before he really became a big member of a band like the Yardbirds. So in the early 60s, almost every hit single that came out of England had him on it as a guitarist. So he's been cited as being on a Who song, a song by the Rolling Stones. But Joe Cocker's With a Little Help from My Friends, he's a guitarist on that song. He's a guitarist on movie background music and on jazz and on blues. He's got Indian influence and Middle Eastern influence and all different types of music, not just heavy metal. And he's very good at all of those. Another reason I think Jimmy Page is the best guitarist is his ability to improvise. So, of course, when he went in the studio, we don't know all this, but often he didn't even know what he was going to be playing the day he went in there, but he was given freedom to play what he played and he improvised. And also, when he was with Led Zeppelin, what we heard on a record, like Led Zeppelin 4, that was the recording that was put down of that performance. But Jimmy Page usually did it in just a few takes. And what you heard in concert was often a much different version. They improvised all the time. They were like jazz musicians, and that they were constantly experimenting and playing. And they played longer versions. Not an example, of course, is "Dazed and Confused." That's on the "Song Remains the Same" soundtrack. But they did that all the time with all their numbers. So his ability to improvise is phenomenal. Also, he's great solo work. So to me, what makes a really great guitar solo is it doesn't have the same melody as like the verses or choruses, but it has a unique melody that fits the character of the song. So, of course, one of the classic examples of that is Brian May's solo on Bohemian Rhapsody. But I think the ones that Jimmy Page has, like on Stairway to Heaven, Whole Lot of Love, What Is and What Should Never Be, Since I've Been Loving You, and of course, in Achilles' Last Stand, all those are examples of him, brilliant solos that just, he's not just playing super fast. He's playing something that's very melodic and is very memorable. And at the same time, it's not the same melody that's being sung by the vocalist. Another thing that makes Jimmy Page a phenomenal guitar player is his strong acoustic guitar work. He not only was good at electric, but he also, of course, played acoustic. And he's, to me, a very good acoustic guitar player. He's not a classical guitarist in the sense like a phenomenal classical guitarist, but he was a very good acoustic guitar player. Another thing that makes Jimmy Page unique and an excellent guitar player is his use of the bow in order to create the sustain that he had at that time. It's pretty innovative. He used it for show in concert, but he used it for background sounds on a lot of the tracks. It kind of gave it a unique cello, violinishy, but electric guitar, unique sound. But it had that long sustain, and that was another thing. His use of slide guitar. There's some really great slide guitarists. Jimmy Page did some really great slide work. Of course, In My Time of Dying is a great example of that. Traveling River Blues is another example of it. But his use of slide guitar to me is very good. His use of echoes, not only regular echoes, but the forward echoes where it comes before the actual sound. It was an innovative technique in the recording studio, but his use of doing that was kind of a cool thing. His recording style of the guitar, it was kind of classical method back in the 60s to take the microphone, put it in the same spot in front of the amp. So it kind of gave you the same sound. Jimmy Page was somebody that experimented with microphone placement. He didn't just put the microphone right in front of the amp, but he also put a microphone a distance from the amp to kind of capture the warmth of the drums or the guitars or whatever. So on Led Zeppelin 1, Led Zeppelin 2, the guitar jumped out at you because of the way he recorded it. And that was a big effect of his that had a strong impact on his play. He plays 12-string as well as 6-string acoustic and electric guitars. Of course, we know he played 12-string on Stairway to Heaven, but he also used it on the Rain Song and things like that. Song remains the same. And so he's very good with those kind of things. Another thing that makes Jimmy Page phenomenal is his guitar orchestration. Bach is known for his fugues, where he has several melodies that are all going on at the same time. And Jimmy Page was a guitarist that did that. Some of the best examples of that are when he has them in Achilles' Last Stand and In the Light. He does that on those two. Another thing that makes him an excellent guitarist is his use of different tunings. I know Crosby, Stills, and Nash use some alternate tunings. Joni Mitchell is probably one of the most famous people for creating interesting, unusual tunings, but quite a collection of Led Zeppelin songs use alternate tunings to get interesting sounds. Of course, probably the most famous one that Jimmy Page has is Kashmir, but he uses it on the Rain Song, and I believe Going to California has an alternate tuning, Brona Your, things like that. They all use alternate tunings, and they all have interesting sounds. And for me, the most beautiful is the Rain Song. That's the most beautiful alternate tuning song it is. But Kashmir is probably the most famous of it. Another thing about him is he held his own, playing with excellent musicians as the only really guitarist playing big stadiums just as sound was kind of coming out. You know, the Pete Townsend of the Who, he did that, but he didn't do all the intricate guitar work that Jimmy Page did. But Jimmy Page held his own and held it together, playing lead and rhythm and whatever. Just he with John Paul Jones and John Bonham. He's one of the top people for doing that in large concert venues and halls and things like that. Of course, playing 12 and 6-string in the same song with his double neck guitar, like he did with Stairway to Heaven. And of course, being able to jump from song to song with The Song Remains the Same and the Rain Song and things like that. And probably one of the last things that Jimmy Page was really phenomenal with was his use of moods and tones. And the way he would describe it was going from a whisper to thunder. And, he would have something very soft and then all of a sudden very loud and powerful. And, very interesting chords and use of harmonics and things like that. So his variety and diversity of all these things together, I think, can make him stand out over Eric Clapton and Jimi Hendrix as being the best guitar player ever. So if you have a different opinion, you want to share that, you're welcome to put it in the comments. Hope you enjoyed the video.